Here's a quick look into today's episode.
Get to this early is better, but if it's a challenge to be present when you're not physically there. So he said, assume that everybody in your organization does not want to be like you. That's probably not going to be the case, but let's make that assumption that it is. He says, that's okay so long as they want to be like the leaders that you lead. They don't have to be like you, want to be like you and see you all the time, so long as they want to be like the leaders you lead.
The biggest decisions that we got as a team and me as an individual over the next few weeks is the market has opened and we are hiring majors and we're hiring captains and we're hiring NCOs and chief warrant officers to come fill out JPMRC. I can't think of something much more important than bringing the right people to the organization. Not necessarily more people, but the right people to this organization as it starts to grow. Welcome to another episode of Teach Me to Fish, where our purpose is to help leaders better understand what drives people. In today's world, the core of recruiting and retaining talent revolves around leadership. And not just average leadership, but motivated, values-based, inspirational leadership. Our purpose is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories and stacking habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. I just wanted to do a quick stand-up. Been probably about 6 weeks, I think, is what it's been since we kind of formally did it. We've been keeping up, but taking a chance to kind of look at what the last few weeks have been look like, what the last months look like, a quick update from the last time since the last time we talked, and then talk about some of the things that we got going on here in the near future and share some of that.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'm all up for it.
In true fashion, we get right into it. What's the biggest thing you kind of got going on right now?
The biggest thing I got going on is still the dissertation, right? But I thought about this, the one thing I have to do today, and it's actually two, if that can be multiple things.
You're testing it with that.
Yeah, I know. Well, one had to do with recharging and just, getting hydrated for the week. And I thought about it. And, the tangible thing I have to do is I have to send an email for the Buffalo Soldier Project, the book project I told you about. Mm-hmm. So I'm
tell everybody real quick.
Yeah, so the Buffalo Soldier Project is a book project that I am putting together that includes about 45 to 50 letters from active duty, retired, and separated enlisted officer and warrant officer Army personnel. Many of them, 90% of them, are African American. And what it is a compilation of letters to the Army as if the Army was their significant other. Because what I'm trying to do is capture the complex relationship between service members and the Army. And I think in those letters, we will have some of these challenges that to questions that I've been asking for quite a while, namely, how we get more, African Americans into the combat arms, but then also, just the love-hate relationship, the challenges and rewards that having a relationship with the armed services foster. Mm-hmm. And so the Army doesn't have a genre like this, an intimate set of letters that can capture experiences. And so I'm looking to put that together from folks from all the way from Vietnam, all the way up through GWAT, from, enlisted to general officer. And so I have to send these emails out to get folks and remind them to write, because that's the hard part. Folks say, well, I'll do it, but to actually take the time to write is a challenge.
Okay. The one thing I got going on right now is gaining clarity going into these next few weeks. We're about to start this huge exercise with the 25th Infantry Division here in Hawaii, the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center. They are our version of the CTC here in the Pacific. And so I got to have clarity on how I'm going to spend my time each day, how we're making progress. You can imagine the execution matrix that goes with something like that. That's my focus, not just for today, but as I go into this week.
Yeah, it's been 6 weeks since you've taken command, just about?
Yeah, about 6 weeks. I spent the first 4 weeks focused down and in on the people, who we got, who's on the team, what's their strengths, what's their weaknesses, listening a ton to what people got to say, what their recommendations are going forward. So I spent a lot of time talking to the folks inside the organization. over the last couple of weeks, I've transitioned to talking to a lot more people outside the organization. So United States Army Pacific, the 25th Infantry Division, TRADOC, folks outside of our team to get their opinion on what we could be doing, what we should be doing, what's the future, how have things changed over the last 6 months to a year? Because if there's one thing that's clear, it's that JPMRC and the Joint Pacific Multinational Readiness Center is different today than it was 6 months ago, and it's dramatically different than it was 2 years ago. Okay, so what you been up to since the last time we chatted?
Oh, tons of stuff. So let me try to work backwards here. So I just came off a trip from DC with our good friend Dr. Gary Gregg down at the University of Louisville. So I got a chance to give a talk to the Strategic Broadening Seminar. I do this every year. And here recently, they just stood up a writing initiative. So in addition to the talk, I got to mentor 3 mid-service officers, one warrant officer, toward the development of a KISSL project, a Key Strategic Initiative List. So they write essays that answer some questions that the Pentagon has been asking folks. And then I kind of got them through the writing process. So that was awesome. I was able to do some research in the Library of Congress, which was amazing. It was my first time up there, and discovered some new scholarship that I'm sifting through right now. Prior to that, I engaged in like the 3-week professional development sort of circuit that stemmed off of that Buffalo Soldier project. And so in my calling folks to ask them the right questions, I got to talk to a lot of GOs and, command sergeant majors about prepping for command. And so it was almost dual effort, right? So we were talking about this book project, but then the conversations shifted toward prepping for command. So from everything from training, to Army command policy, we talked about different variations of what presence might mean.
Give me something that those folks have told you, or something that kind of you combined from that crew, something outside of what everybody kind of assumes that when people say, hey, what are you doing to prepare for command? Yeah,
so this one stems off a personal challenge that I'm thinking about, which is my commute when I assume command. I'm going to have I guess about a 75-minute commute both ways, which is challenging for a battalion commander. And I talked to General Officer Infantry mentor, who told me, he said, it might be a blessing in disguise. Yeah, and he talked about presence. And he said that in his experience, and he's been a battalion commander, brigade commander, now he's GO, but he said in his experience, it is a challenge. And if you can get to this early, it's better. But if it's a challenge to be present when you're not physically there. So he said, assume that everybody in your organization does not want to be like you. That's probably not going to be the case. But let's make that assumption that it is. He says, that's okay so long as they want to be like the leaders that you lead, which was really profound. They don't have to be like you, want to be like you and see you all the time, so long as they want to be like the leaders you lead. And so if you can think about presence from that perspective, then you understand that the time that you're spending mentoring and teaching and coaching your subordinate leaders are going to trickle down to the folks that you never get to see. And so you have to do it with that in mind. And that goes all the way down to, having that slogan that you want everybody to know, or, expect what you inspect. And you just fostering that in your subordinate leaders, so that trickles down. And then he said, don't take for granted just going to the DFAC for meals, right? Or going to the food court in the PX, because a lot of your presence, right, you will see soldiers in those spaces, and people take that for granted. And then the last thing he told me was that commute might be a blessing in disguise, because it's going to force me to be deliberate about my time. And he said, so it might be a blessing in disguise. So he talked about presence. That's the one thing that sticks with me from that conversation.
I love that, because I don't spend 75 minutes, but in the last 6 weeks, the fastest I usually get from Schofield down to Shafter is about 22 minutes. And the longest is about 45 minutes if you hit it at the wrong time, or if somebody gets in a car accident or something like that. But I've used that time purposefully to either listen to something, to listen to a podcast, to have a conversation. Half the time I'm on the phone talking to somebody on the East Coast as I'm driving in. It's the perfect way to focus that time, because I have found that from the second you get out of the car and you walk into the office, your time is now shared with everybody else, and it needs to be, right? And so you need to make yourself available. Leaders have to be available, accessible to their folks. And So it's hard to do deep work. It's hard to sit there and
Mm.
focus on a 5-pager. Those things I do in the morning before I even get in the car, before I even head down the hill. That's how I'm spending my time. That has been a little bit more of a challenge than I thought it would be in the first few weeks.
Yeah, yeah. Hearing you talk makes me think about just for me, I know what I've learned over these last 3 years at Duke is to really appreciate time to think. And I usually get that when I run. If I'm not listening to music or something, like I can think about the problems that I had the day prior. I can think about what was coming next and just like let my mind roam. And so that drive will be an opportunity to do that too.
Another thing that has been a bigger challenge than I thought it would be is at the brigade level. It's organizing the calendars and how everybody else is also spending their time. How do you synchronize those things? How do people have an understanding of what other people on the team are doing at different times, so that when
Yeah.
you set something up or you ask for something, how does it conflict with the things that those folks are doing and how they're spending their time? That has been a bigger challenge than what I thought it would be.
Have you found that I had that mantra, that saying that we spend 80% of our time trying to figure out what somebody else is doing and 20% of our time trying to communicate it to somebody else? Have you found that to be true?
For sure. I think it's been more me understanding what other people
Yeah.
are doing and not so much reporting. There's a lot less reporting about what we're doing to our higher headquarters. United States Army Pacific is trusting that we at JPMRC are synchronizing the exercise for the 25th Infantry Division, teaming with them, teaming with the 11th.
Hmm.
They are trusting that we are doing that. So they're not asking for
Yeah.
a lot of reports. They're not asking for a ton of updates, but that becomes on us, which is how do you quickly communicate to your higher headquarters? And I don't know if we're doing this well yet or not. Quickly, briefly, give them what they need to know so that they can keep moving on. What I did was I sent a quick 30-day azimuth check to General Flynn, let him know
Mm.
what's our vision, what's our lines of effort, people winning and transforming, what our current priorities are right now, focused on the execution of the 2501, which is the exercise here with the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii. Then I'll be going to the Combat Training Center Commanders Conference at Fort Leavenworth, and then we will be doing the Alaska rotation in January. So those are our three big, huge priorities. And then I set the stage for what I see as our 90-day assessment, and that's how we're going to assess the organization as a team, where we're at right now, and where we see ourselves going forward. And what we'll do is we'll dig into those lines of effort. The people, how are we doing? Are we expert warfighters? Are we bringing the right people on the team? Are we building the team? Winning? Are the exercises becoming more effective? Not necessarily just bigger, but are they becoming more complex? Are they becoming more effective? Is the Army, are we learning? And then are we transforming? Are we taking this combat training center, the instrumentation, the way that we report, the way that we collect data and then share it with the
Hmm.
Army and other organizations? Are we transforming the way that we improve those things? Are we evolving, making things a little bit easier, making things less expensive, and making us be able to do it with less people?
Hmm.
That's what I was focused on with the how we communicate to our higher headquarters initially.
Yeah, that's a lot. That sounds great. And when we get to the get it off your chest, I'm going to talk a little bit about, I guess, my ponderings of large scale combat operations and a conversation I had with another
Yeah,
mentor as well.
yeah. Well, why wait? Why not just hit it right now?
You want to go there now? Okay. All right. Awesome. This is the first time we jumped around yeah. So get it off your chest. I got two.
Yeah.
And one we don't have to spend too much time on, just based on your curiosity. I'll give you the first one though. Large scale ground combat ops. So I've been thinking about this. Your peer down in JRTC, they do the podcast.
The
The one you're
Crucible.
on is a very good podcast. My goodness, they just did a large scale combat operations forum or conference, and I listened to that and I took some notes on it, and the takeaway might be counter to what maybe they intended, which is to say that there's just so much to discuss, and there's so many TTPs and so many good ideas and lessons learned. And I'm thinking about just how overwhelming that might be to our junior leaders to hear all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it got me thinking about prioritizing fundamentals, perhaps, of training prior to getting to the JRTC fight, or the JPMRC fight or the NTC fight. And what are those things? What are those 3 to 5 things I want to prioritize? Because we can't do it all. And I'm just thinking about how overwhelmed I would be if I was a team leader. And you told me to manage the counter UAS fight, and understand disbursement and machine gun math and security, and it's just so much stuff, right?
Yep.
No, I'm not saying we're not capable of that, but if you focus on everything, you focus on nothing. So, one of the conversations I had with a mentor is, how to prioritize fundamentals of training so that, by getting 3 to 5 things right, everything else flows, right? So
Yep.
for me, in thinking about LISCO, there's a paradox that has not been discussed. And I'm talking to Ben Scott about this. You might write an article about this, but I'm calling it the paradox of mass. Because in a large-scale ground combat operation, mass is essential for brigade and division fights. But when you talk about company and below, you're talking about decentralized agility, not creating heat signatures. So mass means something way different. In terms of, when you talk about battalion and low, you want to mass at the time and place of your choosing, but you have to be able to transition and disperse just as quickly, given the threat, right? So there's a difference there, and I want to try to explore that. And so the things that I'm focused on and talking to the person I'm going to take over for is trying to focus on the fundamental of communications training, across echelon. And this might change, but communication, defense. When talking about parachute infantry regiments, understanding the defense and the engagement area development, down to a science. Looking at obstacle emplacement and integrating fires, and then security just sort of is the umbrella under which all of that falls. Right, security all the time, and the challenge being, how you foster that type of mentality in a garrison environment. That's the challenge. How do you foster a LISCO mentality in a garrison environment? So I'm thinking about those things. I just returned back to ADP 7.0. I just read that the other day. This week, I'm going to dig into ADRP 7.0 to go deeper, and then just have more conversations about these things. So yeah, that's where my mind's at right now.
It's awesome how what you just said and things that you're thinking about, in some cases, so far separated from, the day-to-day of the Army. And we're about to go ahead and execute, this exercise here with the JPMRC. The rotation is in RSOI right now. So everybody is starting to show up, and we start to go. And I'm seeing the same thing, which is there is so much that the brigade and the division and everybody is being asked to try new things, right? Yep. Transformation in contact, 2nd Brigade, 25th. How do they implement a cross-domain and effects company? How do they start to use loitering munitions? How do they use drones to seek, to strike, to find, the enemy? Electronic warfare in so many different ways. And then we're trying to replicate it. Then we're trying to have the enemy do it against them. And you take all these things, and the soldiers, they can get overwhelmed quickly, which is, I'm trying to do all this new stuff, but yet remembering what are the fundamentals of movement, and the fundamentals of movement and maneuver and communication. And nothing takes the place of detailed planning. Nothing takes the place of, for commanders with their decision support matrix and how they make decisions, what information they're going to need in order to make those decisions. And then graphic control measures of how they're gonna make sure that we know where each other are, and that we got direct fire control measures to make sure that the way that we're putting our munitions in the right place, and we know exactly where the enemy is, we know where we are. Nothing takes the place of those basics. And that's what I'm hoping to help this brigade and the division as we go in and focus on some of those things with our OCs, on how they're collecting the data, how they're measuring the data, how we're assessing it, and are we measuring what matters.
I've been thinking a lot about how to foster a high velocity organization. And when I say high velocity, I mean rapid decision making in spaces of ambiguity, right? And a lot of that is cultivated through built trust. But when you start talking about planning processes, right, these long drawn out MDMP processes can be truncated if, for example, the staff has their running estimates all the time. Not just like we wait until we start a planning process to have your stuff. Like you come into it with that. And I've been going back and forth, not going back and forth, but like to having a conversation with my mentor about mission analysis being vital. Yes.
Yep.
But wargaming is really the venue that all of those other products that you talked about, the XM, the DST, graphic control measures, new tasks, comes out of the war game. But staffs seldom do that, at least the one in my experience. You seldom sit down and do it. And I think there's this idea, and I could be wrong, but there's this idea that things have to be 100% doctrinally correct. And doctrine is a guide. But I think sometimes we get so wedded to doctrine that we get overwhelmed by trying to go through all the processes instead of taking a step back, saying, okay, what is relevant for our current situation? And how much time, that's the other factor that very few people talk about. How much time do we have to do this thing?
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking about when I go into command, how to ask that question, how much time is this going to take for everything, so that, the staff can anticipate that before briefings. Yeah. How much time is it going to take to assemble? How much time does it take to uncoil? How much time is, time of flight for a mortar round? And all of these things have to do with time. So you're right. It's a lot of stuff, but, again, trying to take those 3 to 5 things and then under which other warfighting functions will follow.
Yeah.
Is the challenge.
I'm excited to, there's a couple people that I've identified inside of the organization that we've already started to have a conversation about recording with those, doing an episode with those folks as we come out of this exercise after we've been able to do the mid-tour AARs and the final AARs and kind of collect our thoughts and be able to say what were some of those things and what were the things that worked. We're going to share them with a lot of people. So I'm really excited to use this venue to get those people talking, to get those people sharing, and and summarize it.
It'd be good to hear from them. I know listening to the Crucible, folks coming out of those rotations, you hear the same challenges over and over again. Managing the transitions. The knowledge gap associated with a junior staff, adaptability, because some folks, they fill in these positions and they're new. And how do you, rely on systems so you don't have one single point of failure? And
as I look at what we call them AARs, and there's this thought that, well, we shouldn't make the same mistake that we made last time. But those aren't necessarily mistakes. Bringing on new leaders isn't making a mistake. Right? Every organization has new leaders that have not done the duty position that they're in. Those aren't mistakes. Like you can't say, well, this next time I go to JRTC or JPMRC, I'm going to make sure that everybody that we go to this exercise with has been in their duty position for 6 months. You can't do that. There's no such thing. Right. We didn't even go to combat with people that had been into their duty positions for 6 months, right? Bringing new people onto the team is life. Going through transitions is life. Like there's always going to be a transition. You can't prepare for the transition 6 months ahead of time. You have to go through it. Like I could have done, I had a year here living in Hawaii to prepare to be the commander for JPMRC in the COG. There are most of the things I'm doing today, I could not have prepared for 6 months ago. I couldn't prepare for what I'm going to do on Monday to brief 2nd Brigade, how our OCs are going to help them make the most realistic training exercise possible. I couldn't have prepared for that 6 months ago. That has to be prepared, 48, 72 hours with your team, and then you have to do rehearsals. There's bridges that you just can't cross until it's time to cross that bridge. Yes, you can prepare your mind. Yes, you can look at some of the other things, but those challenges are life, and I don't think we should look at them as units making the same mistakes over and over. I think that's training.
Yeah, it's training. So there's a tension between going to the CTCs to learn and to win. And there's a balance you got to strike there, because if you don't humble yourself to learn, when I went to JRTC, I've been 3 times, and it was the best experience ever. One, because I learned from my OC, and I would ask questions en route, and I would even try new things, because that's the place, in my opinion, to try new things, given that the current environment you're in. And you were there when we did the RDSM, RDSP. Right.
Yes.
Right. Pitched a 15-minute order in front of General Gerard at the time. And I was scared shitless because it was not it was just not the what you would typically see, but it was what we needed at the time, and
Yes.
everybody understood it, and it worked. Or when we did the rehearsal, there were what is it? What we did the R pole. It was the R pole
Yes.
rehearsal.
When we rehearsed up
When
on
we
top of that
replicated,
hill to go through the
yeah,
gimlets. Hmm.
that's right. And we actually had people in time and space do that. And it was it was a quick rehearsal, and it was a conversation. It wasn't a performance. That's I learned that in the last RTC rotation. It's like the rehearsal can be a conversation so that you have situational understanding. So, yeah, I'm excited to get back into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're already getting your head right. You're having the conversations and you're doing a lot of that deep work. What big decisions do you got coming up?
None. I thought about this for 20 minutes this week. I don't have any, no, I don't have any big decisions this week, which is nice. And cause that's seldom the case. And so, I could just kind of, I can pace myself on the work that I have. And I hope I'm not missing anything, but I'm pretty sure I don't have any big decisions this week.
That's great. I feel like that opens up your mind to do the deep work and to focus on the things the biggest decisions that we got as a team and me as a individual over the next few weeks is the market has opened and we are hiring majors and we're hiring captains and we are hiring NCOs and chief warrant officers to come fill out JPMRC. I've been getting multiple emails a day, text messages, doing phone calls, and invest in time. I can't think of something much more important than bringing the right people to the organization. Not necessarily more people, but the right people to this organization as it starts to grow. All of our positions that used to be filled by captains are now being filled by field grade officers that have done the duty position that they have. That they did. So, for example, our senior intelligence officer has already been a battalion S3 and a battalion XO in the 500th MI Brigade.
Yeah.
And so now our SIO is now on his third year of KD as the SIO for JPMRC. We'll be bringing in a lieutenant colonel who's been a battalion commander in the intelligence community that is going to come and be our senior intelligence officer that can then advise, coach the battalions and the companies that are coming through JPMRC, but also to help our team plan the future exercises, the next ones going forward, making them more complex. We got to grow an aviation task force. We've got to grow an artillery task force. We've got to grow the maneuver task forces out with from captains to majors, battalion S3s, battalion XOs, for each of those task forces, somebody that's done it before so that they can, one, advise the team as they're going through, but two, so that they start to know the future. Bringing in company commanders that have already done one or two companies. We're going to be bringing in dare I say, on live, bringing in Chase Kemp, who's up in Alaska, who's already been an FSC company commander. And then he was the HHC company commander in 211. So now he's got 2.5 years of experience of how to operate in Alaska. Bring him to the team to be the Brigade S4 as we start to move forward and work with the support battalion, so we can understand, one, how to make the exercise and prepare the exercise in Alaska in that environment. And then two, when it comes time to execute it, there is that person advising, OCing, and observing the people that are going through it. So that's the biggest decision I got is who we bring on to the team, and we're always out there recruiting.
Yeah, that's an important one. Wow. Well, I'm excited for Chase. I know he is excited as well. I need to give him a call.
Yeah.
coming back to the mothership.
That's right. The mothership, the mother island.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about big decisions you got to make. What have we not covered? Your other get it off your chest.
Oh, you want to do that now?
Yeah.
Okay. This is a challenge I think all service members might face, right? So the other night, I dropped my son off at an appointment, and I went to a sports bar as he was getting done with his rehearsal. Mm-hmm. And I sat at the sports bar watching the Dallas game, and I sat next to a guy who made a comment. And It was he looked over. I didn't know him. I was just minding my business, and he looked over, and there was a woman off in the corner. She had on a mask, COVID mask, and he said, he goes, "Oh, look at her. Bet you she's not voting for Trump." Now I ain't gonna get political, but so I said, I just kind of, you know, laughed it off a little bit. And so he had a few. He had one or two. He had one or two beers, and then he said something to me about 5 minutes later, and I introduced myself to him. Now here's the dilemma, right? Because we got to talk. I don't know how we got on the subject, but I said, yeah, I'm in the military. And then he was, he spent some time in the Marines. So he was like, hoorah, doing that whole thing. And then he started to talk about the SecDef, like very pejoratively in a negative way. And so now I'm sitting here and I'm like wishing I hadn't told this guy I was in the military. And I think that's what it was. He was from New York. I'm a Yankee fan, I like the Yankees. And he goes, "Are you clearly not from New York?" And I talked about West Point. So that's how he knew. I was teaching at West Point. He knew I was in the military. And he just went in on, the vice president, the president, SecDef, just in a horrible way, right? Horrible way. And so I'm trying to sit here and keep my cool and not be political, or be as apolitical as I can. And so I thought about it. I said, okay, let me engage this guy from a perspective of just trying to learn why he thinks the way he thinks. And so I'm just going to ask questions. And I guess I bring this up because the older I get in the military, the more these conversations, these very polarizing conversations come up, and the more I have to figure out how to negotiate them and still preserve sort of a neutral space. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So I started asking him questions, and, he started talking about Tucker Carlson and like and I'm not against Fox News at all, but everything he was saying was from an echo chamber perspective, right?
Yep.
So I told him, I said, hey, listen, man, I said, I hear what you're saying. You're very loud. You're almost breaking sports bar etiquette right now. We ain't supposed to be talking politics in here. This is game zone,
Yeah.
And so he didn't get aggressive with me, but we differ in very different perspectives. And then he took it to race, and he was like, I'm sure you're voting for Kamala because of the black thing. And so I asked him, I said, well, it's just me being apolitical as I can. I said, what are you reading? Do you read history? Like, do you read philosophy at all? And he's like, oh, those people no different than me. Who's that? Who's Plato? That guy, what did he write? I said, okay. I said, it's going to be very hard to have a conversation with you because you're telling me everything that you've seen on TV. And I get it. I'm trying to listen to you, but it's very clear to me that like you're very entrenched in your thinking. And I'm not trying to change your perspective. I just want to understand why, from which it's motivated. Like, where does this come from? And it was a very frustrating conversation, very frustrating conversation with this guy. And I left the conversation because I got up and left the moment he said, I said, hey, man, I said, it's hard for me to listen to you because everything you're telling me is ego driven. Is just ego driven. There's no rationale coming. There's no logic. You're just telling me what your ego is saying. He goes, no, I'm just speaking emotion. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is why I got to leave, because ego and emotion is the same thing, and you don't know the difference. So have a good night.
Yeah.
And I walked off very frustrated. I say that to say these encounters are getting more frequent. And I don't know if it's because I'm just trying to be attuned to, where a person is gathering their knowledge or from what perspective they're coming from. But that was the first time I've had that one. And that polarizing. And it was pretty frustrating.
Yeah. There was like 4 things that you said in there that are part of my get it off my chest, which is how do I keep learning and how do I keep spending time to get better at certain things? 1, after being in the Army for a long time. 2, as we start to get older. 3, when your world starts to get more and more requirements put on you. How do you find time to learn? And so I was going to ask you, like, what are you reading? But you've already shared a lot of that. What I've been reading to try to do that is a lot of Seth Godin stuff over the last few weeks. And the two I'm staring at right now, All Marketers Are Liars. They tell stories. And then Tribes is the one that I'm working through right now. It's super easy to get through. In the first one, All Marketers Are Liars, and they tell stories, is he talks about their worldview and people's worldview. And you are never going to change somebody else's worldview. No matter what data you provided that gentleman, it's never going to change his worldview. And in a lot of cases, no matter what data they present to you or to me, it ain't going to change our worldview. So people have this view of how they see the world, right? And they're not looking for data to change their mind. They're looking for data to support their worldview.
To support.
They're looking for
right.
data and things that are out there that are going to support their way. So when you marketers, or when you're telling a story, you got to understand the people that you're communicating with, or the people that you're talking to, and where they come from. And then you find the data that supports their view, and then their heads start nodding up and down as you move forward. So you're never gonna convince that guy anything, no matter what data, no matter how good you are, no matter how you even said it. You said you're going to lose this argument. The second you go into an argument, no one wins. Because both sides,
That's right.
It doesn't matter if you have the data. It also doesn't matter if he had different data or he presented his argument in a good way. You might look at that and go, hey, I never thought about it like that way. But very few people do that. And then with the one I'm working through right now, tribes, he said people that tribes, and when these movements and groups of people start to come together, it doesn't necessarily have to do with like, hey, I'm going to go create a movement and I'm going to study a bunch of things and then I'm going to go off in this direction. It's people are so passionate and they believe so much about whatever it is that they're doing, and then people choose to join them. People choose to be a part of it, and they didn't intend on it to become that movement or become that tribe or become that that group, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're just attracted to it. So just be who you are. Be what it is that you are passionate about, and that you wake up in the morning and you can't wait to go and do it. And then the people that also are inspired by that and are fired up by that, they're going to come and join you. They're going to talk about it on their own. They're going to share it with their teammates and their friends and their family, right? And all of a sudden you do have this group that's inspiring you to kind of keep the movement going and keep the tribe strong.
I think I appreciate it, if anything, to salvage from that conversation, hearing that perspective, because there was a lot of time where I just shut up and let them talk.
Yeah.
And there's there's value in silence. But yeah, that's never happened to me before. And I'm like, man, that was an interesting that was an interesting interaction for sure.
Yeah. All right.
For sure.
Well, I think we're at about that. We're at that time, but we're about 40 minutes in. What else?
Yep. Very quickly for the week, and then rest of the day. I got to finish a book, a dissertation chapter this week. I got a podcast with a Harvard Business School professor, which is awesome. I'm looking forward to that, and that's leading in moments of crisis that we're going to talk about. I got to do ADRP 7.0. I got to read that, think about prioritizing fundamentals, and then I'm planning a men's retreat, which is going to be awesome. Pigeon Forge in October, and some of your good friends are going to be there. So Doug Heston, is coming. Mark Ring from 3/4 Cab, and then Dr. Greg. And we're gonna get a cabin in the woods, and we're gonna eat steak and drink bourbon, and we're gonna just share some camaraderie, which is gonna be nice. So I got to plan that, and then the rest of the day I'm spending some time with my neighbor. Right after this, spend time with the family. And I'm going to read a little bit this evening, reading A Thin Red Line right now, which is a fantastic novel. I think it's 227 or 27th Infantry Division in Guadalcanal. So I'm going to read some of that today.
Well, I want to pick up Christy from the airport. She just visited. She went to her grandma's funeral and then followed on to visit Ryan at West Point, and just went to the Army-Navy West Point volleyball game. That was on Friday night, so that was unbelievable. What an electric moment that was. Seeing them, that place was packed. The photos, the videos coming out of that are unbelievable. She's loving it at West Point.
That's great.
Yeah, she said it's easy. She said it's a lot easier than I thought it would be. I said, one, that's because I think you were prepared, mentally and physically. If you're physically prepared, everything else gets a little bit easier.
Everything else,
right?
Yeah.
And then if you're mentally prepared and you can get through some of the academic rigor that they have there, things are a little bit easier. And she said, and on top of it, Dad, all you got to do is I just got to do what they tell me to do. And if I just do what they tell me to do, everything seems a lot easier. She's loving it.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, that's great. PT and attitude.
PT and attitude. I can't wait. I'm going to be talking to the folks. They're about to kick off on tomorrow morning. I'll talk to them about what makes you successful in the CTCs, PT and attitude, and then we'll start to get into some of the more specifics as we start to work our way through the planning and the preparation and some of the detailed planning that goes in it, because nothing takes the place of detailed planning. Nothing takes the place of leadership, and leadership understanding their people and putting it together. And then at the end of the day, PowerPoint slides and pieces of paper don't win wars, but leaders do, and rehearsals, as those leaders lead and they rehearse the things that they know they're going to have to go and do and practice it, so they're not doing anything for the first time when you get in a tough situation.
Yeah, that sounds great, sir. I'll be looking forward to hearing how it goes, and I can bounce some of my thoughts off you and learn from you as well and what you're seeing.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to. Also, I got a few people lined up here, in the future to do some episodes. So we won't just be talking about JPMRC, but we'll be talking with folks, about their story, about what drove them to serve. I got General Gerard just recently retired, and so he said once he gets back home, he's gonna, we'll get him on to tell his story. Got Mike Albaugh on the line to tell his story. He's about getting ready to retire. I got First Sergeant Castello, who's out here running one of the cross-domain and effects companies. So he'll tell his story, but we'll also get a chance to hear what he just did going through the exercise. Little spoiler alert, I recently got a chance to record an episode with the Legends of the 75th. So I'm looking forward to that coming out and sharing that with folks. And then I also got booked to do Mentors for Mill episode. I've been a fan of that Mentors for Mill for years now. We're going to go do that here at the end of this exercise. Going to do that with them. So I'm really looking forward to sharing some thoughts on both of those.
That's awesome, sir. That's great, and great conversation with Command Sergeant Major Curry. I enjoyed listening to that one. Yeah, my old neighbor.
Yeah, he's doing great. The division's doing great. The people out here are thriving. They're really excited about going into this exercise. They're excited about the exercises that they've been doing in Indonesia and through Pathways. 3rd Brigade just got back, and off we go. And before you know it, it's going to be Christmas, and then we're going to be into the springtime here. So there's so much goodness happening out here. People are fired up.
Yeah, I miss it. I was just talking to Colonel Mayo yesterday, Colonel Retired Mayo, and I told him, what is that roll coming off Big Ivan? Center line roll.
Yeah.
I dream about that thing. Oh, man, a gut check. What a gut check. That takes your soul. That's what Batul said yesterday. It just takes your soul.
Yes. So. Yeah. The old Jungle 5K. The old Jungle 5K. I was just talking to somebody about that. That was awesome.
That's awesome. If you see Sergeant Major Schmidt, Jason Schmidt.
I do. I see him all the time.
You tell him I say hello. He and I was in the first SBS class with Dr. Greg. And so he's a good friend of mine.
I'll tell him he's going to come down and visit us this week. But I saw him at the Hail and Farewell, at General Gerard's Hail and Farewell, because he's the USERPAC CSM right now.
That's right. That's right.
I saw him the other night. He just did a podcast on with WTF Moments.
Yeah, he's a good man. He's a warrior for sure. But you tell him I say hello.
All right, brother. I will. You have a great afternoon. Have a great rest of your Sunday. We'll talk soon.
All right, sir. Take care.
All right, brother. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening today. I hope we sparked some thoughts about the people that have inspired you to be who you are today. I hope you share some of your thoughts, and better yet, demonstrate them for the people in your life. Our pursuit is to get a little bit better every day. Progress equals small victories stacked on top of each other, building like compound interest. Keep stacking these positive habits. Habits like getting up early, working your butt off, learning something new, being positive, and surrounding yourself with phenomenal people. Please share your comments at the links in the show notes and DM us at Teach Me to Fish podcast on Instagram or Facebook. Looking forward to our next conversation.
Times don't fly too high. Be sure to keep the ground in sight. Fly forever if you keep it tight. Love the world, but keep the sky on your mind.